this keeps changing what's available for us from 1950. So we're just going to do everything we can to get you that latest and greatest information, really your guide to the 1950 census. And I do have a YouTube channel, so I hope that if you enjoy today that you'll come over and click the subscribe button, check out the videos that we have, lots of free videos there. And the latest edition of my book here, The Genealogist Google Toolbox, is available exclusively at my website. And that's in its new 3rd edition and all kinds of new stuff. In this session, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what you can learn about your family in the 1950 census and what you need to know in order to be able to get the most out of it and kind of prepare your search. We'll touch on some of the most important elements, such as who the enumerators were, what they did, how they did it, the maps that are used, that are available to you, understanding the records like the enumerators did. Really, we have to understand the records we're looking at, kind of the why behind them, so that we can really make the most of them and interpret them correctly. And of course, most importantly, we're going to talk about the latest strategies for searching for the records right now in their current state. So I'm so thrilled to be able to say the party has already started. I have taught versions of this presentation for the last year, and I've always had to say, oh, we have to wait, but we don't have to wait anymore. And that is really good news, because the 1950 census can help you do many things as a genealogist. It can help you confirm what you have already found, what you already know about your family. It can also provide some new facts and clues, particularly things that might be able to further your research. Might even clear up some things that you thought you knew that weren't quite right. So it's really exciting to have a brand new record collection to work with. The questions answered in the 1950 census on this form, which you probably have seen at this point as you've gone through, although it's typically black and white on our monitors. But we're going to get information like the specific address where our relatives lived, whether they were living on a farm or not, names, people in the household, their race, sex, age, marital status, and things, a lot of information about their occupation. If you think about what's happening in 1950, they've just come out of World War II. And there's a lot of folks returning back from serving in the war. They're going out into the workforce. Families are expanding. The baby boom is happening. And so they were really trying to get a clear picture of how the economy was changing, how housing was changing. And of course, there were a lot of changes at that time. So that is really the focus. So there are some items that we've been used to seeing in 1930, 1940 that we're not going to see in 1950. So let's talk about who we're going to be seeing, because that really comes down to geography, doesn't it? In 1950, again, the country's changing. And you can see from this photograph that they went to great lengths to enumerate the population. And in fact, these were enumerators who went out on dog sled in Alaska. Now, of course, in 1950, Alaska is still a territory, but they did cover the territories and other associated lands that go along with the United States. So we have the continental United States, and you're looking at a map of the population distribution in 1950. They also enumerated Alaska and Hawaii as territories. Of course, American Samoa, we're talking about that for some of the genealogy companies, Samoa has now been indexed. The Canal Zone, Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and some of the smaller island territories. So it's really interesting to see that, back in 1950, we're talking about more of like 150 million people, nearly half the population that we have today. The 1950 census also was very unique in that it ushered in a lot of new features and data collection improvements. They were really focused on getting the most accurate census than ever before. They had identified areas where it fell short in previous enumerations, where they missed people, how they missed people. And in 1950, it was all about efficiency and putting processes in place. And I want to talk about that because I think it is a really good reminder as we dig into the records and maybe we come up into a situation where we don't find somebody that we would expect to find or where we expect to find them. And it's easy to kind of think, oh, there was just a mistake. Oh, they just missed my people, right? But really, more than ever, chances are they're there. They're just maybe not where you thought they were. That this was a really, really accurate census. And I want to show you some strategies as we go along on how to find those people who aren't quite where you think they should be. The census enumerators, part of the improvement process was training. And so they were really focused on creating an entire new efficiency process for training these enumerators so they would take a more accurate census. So this is literally from the 1950 training plan, and it really shows how they kind of workflowed this out. 26 chief instructors kind of did the main training. They had obviously a program they had developed, and they taught a few hundred instructors. They went out and taught 8,300 crew leaders, and eventually 140,000 enumerators were fully trained and sent out to do the work. So definitely we're going to be seeing a lot more accuracy. Now, how did an enumerator know where to count? Well, of course, it all comes down to our enumeration districts. Of course, we call them EDs. And this is the geographic area that an enumerator, a census taker, would be covering. And the idea here was that an enumeration district would be outlined in such a way and kind of designed in such a way that a single enumerator could be assigned to that district and not cross paths with any other enumerators. Also, they wouldn't by chance miss an area because it hadn't been pre-planned. This is all mapped out before they ever go out on April 1st of 1950. And another thing about an enumeration district is the reason why they are the size they are is because it was designed for one person, one enumerator, to be able to cover that area in the 2 to 4 weeks that they had assigned to do the work. So it's all very strategic, and this is what the enumeration district map may look like. Interestingly, they didn't actually create maps just for this purpose. It wasn't the Census Bureau who created these maps. What they did was they went out to local municipalities, utilities, the county, anybody who had very recently, in the very late 1940s, drawn up maps for other purposes and that covered the areas they needed. And then they would take a copy of that and then they would mark it all up and divide it all out and make sure that every enumeration district was assigned a number and that everything got covered. So what you'll see consistent amongst the maps is the color coding system they used. And you'll see a key in the bottom corner of the map that green was kind of the ward. And then within that, you get the orange lines and the orange numbers, and those are your enumeration districts. And of course, right now, between now and the time that the index is fully done and complete, ED numbers are super important if you really want to be able to find people right away in the records that are in the current state that they are, which are not fully indexed. Although we have a little more indexing than maybe you might have realized. We'll talk about that in a second. So you might need, again, this ED number in order to browse the records and find people. The good news is these maps can be downloaded for free from the National Archives, and you can use the stevemorse.org website to do that, his one-step pages. And if you follow my YouTube channel, you'll have seen my recent interview with Steve Morse. He's a terrific guy, just so innovative, and he's been so passionate about putting this together. And he shows in that video kind of some little tips and tricks for using his website. And the good news is the maps do not fall under that 72-year rule that made us wait until April 1st of 2022 to get our hands on the 1950 census. So if you would like to get these maps, and I really encourage you to, I mean, when you think about family history and genealogy, it's all about location and time frame. So having these old maps from exactly the time period that you're researching can be really enlightening and helpful. There's over 8,000 digitized ED maps over at the National Archives in Record Group 29. And the thing to remember about this is while in most cases you'll be able to find them, there will be rare occasions where the area was just so rural and so sparsely populated that they didn't actually have an ED map. They didn't need one. They basically just assigned the enumerator to that area and that was it. So if you want to find these, you can go and search the National Archives website, but many people steer clear of that because it's kind of cumbersome to use. It's certainly not laid out the way all the other genealogy websites are that we're used to using. So it can be kind of challenging to find what you're looking for. A great way to do it is to use, as I said, Steve Morse's one-step tools. And you can find the maps that way. Let me show you here. If you come to his ED tool finder and you look up the state, and then if you know the county, go ahead and put the county in here. So I'm looking at the county where my grandparents lived, San Joaquin, and then the city. If the city is listed, great. If not, you can just go to the county. Depends how populated the area was. You'll get several different kinds of links. The National Archives viewer link will take you straight over to the right page on the National Archives website where you can not only view the map, but you can look through which other associated maps there are in this collection and you can download them. So these are high resolution maps. They're fantastic for bringing into Google Earth, which I love doing because I like really creating a whole map collection for my genealogy research. And here you can see the viewer works really well. You can grab the screen and kind of move around and zoom in and zoom out. But I like to actually get a copy for myself. And of course, these are in the public domain. This is from the government. This is your records. So you can go to their site, and when you click the download button, you'll get the full-size map, high resolution, and now you can just right-click on the map and save image as and save it straight to your hard drive. And then you can do whatever you want with it, including what I love to do, I talk about in my book, is create a unique map overlay in Google Earth where I bring all my old maps in together and I kind of create this whole genealogy workspace in terms of mapping in the Google Earth software. If you want to learn more about that, and we could spend all day talking about enumeration district maps, but we won't, go check out this video. It is on my YouTube channel. It's also on my website with a companion article, step by step, how to find the maps, use the maps, create the map overlays, all kinds of good stuff. Now, Ancestry did recently, this is brand new, launch their mapping tool. And it's kind of fun. It's personally fun for me to see this because over 10 years ago, they invited me to their corporate headquarters in San Francisco. And I met with them for the day and they just picked my brain because they knew I was a real advocate and I was teaching and writing in my books about using Google Earth for genealogy. And so I do a ton of mapping kinds of things, all kinds of creative projects for genealogy. And they kind of wanted to know what I was doing, how I was doing it, and how they might be able to incorporate it. My stance has always been they really need to deal with those two components, time frame, right? So timelines and things like that, which they've been incorporating, but also geography. These are the two kind of pieces of context that we need. And now we're seeing it. And so I'm really thrilled to see that they're really taking to heart this idea of the geographic elements and the overlays that we discussed way back then. And now they have them in their Explore Maps section. This is terrific. So if you click Explore Maps, you get a map which really looks like it's kind of based on the Google Maps. And all the black circles are showing you clusters of different enumeration districts. What I would suggest is use the search box. If you know the address or even just the town, but if you're really fortunate, if you know the address, put it in here in the box. But it's important to select the populated list from the list. So don't just keep typing. If you see the one that you know you're typing in there, pick from Ancestry's version of that, because that way it will find it exactly. And here's the same map. And so they've overlaid it here. And when I hover my mouse, you can see the pin where the house is located, and hovering your mouse right over that ED shows you exactly it's 75-8. So it's super great, fast way to not only find the enumeration district, but also get a chance to look at the maps before you download them yourselves. Now, I still prefer to go and ultimately go download these maps to my own computer, and I bring them into my workspace in Google Earth because I have a lot more going on that has to do with my family history. We can do it on their website, but we can't really put things working together in context. So that's why I like them all in one place that I can work with. Back at the National Archives then, once I know that ED number, I can put in the state and just go back here and check. Remember, it was 75.8. We're going to type in 75.8 in the ED field at the National Archives search page for 1950. And instantaneously, I get exactly the collection that I need. If we click population schedules, now we are looking at the pages of ED 75-8 in Stockton, California. So from that, I can just start browsing if I want to and look for people, including my grandparents who were there at that time. So I would really encourage you, think about using the different tools that are getting released right now in conjunction with each other. You do not have to just stay on one site. In fact, I would highly encourage you not to. Okay, so we were talking about the enumerators and the importance of the EDs. Let's really understand this collection just like an enumerator would. And I just had to share with you a little bit of the enumerator history because I think it's so interesting. Up until about 1870, did you know that the job of the enumerator fell to the U.S. Marshals? And if you look closely at those old census records up in the right-hand corner, you'll see on this one, for example, in Ohio, it was the assistant marshal. That was actually printed on the form, and he signed it. Callaway signed it. So, these are folks who were not hired just to do this. They did not go through the training programs that they did in 1950, so you can really see how there would be quite a range of accuracy. And so for those earlier censuses, they didn't receive hardly any training, and really everybody didn't get forms printed until about 1830. So it really makes a difference on the accuracy. Now, how do you know the way the 1950 census enumerator knew what to do? How do you know what the little markings mean on the paper and all that? Well, it's all about this instruction manual. This is the enumerator's reference manual. It's 24 pages of very specific instructions that they received in 1950. And this is your key to understanding what you're seeing on the census page. If we see a mark or a notation on the form, or let's say that a field gets left blank, what does that mean, right? You can turn to this instruction reference manual and look it up and find out what it means. And the reason I think this is so important is because no matter what genealogy collection of records that you're working with, it's really important to understand the why behind the records. Why were these records created? Unfortunately, it wasn't for genealogists, right? It had another purpose. Maybe it was tax collection. Maybe it was trying to do statistical reports. Maybe there's all different kinds of records we deal with that have many different purposes that have nothing to do with genealogy. We come at them from a genealogical perspective, but we have to understand, we need to interpret them from the original purpose of the record and also what the person creating the record was told to do. So whenever we have questions about that, this is the book to turn to, and this is available. You can download it for free at the Census Bureau website. And I would really encourage you, that should be the first thing you do after we get done today, is go get yourself a copy of that so that you can turn to it. Let me show you an example. In 1940, why would you need the enumerator reference manual? Because if you're looking at the census records, you start to see those X's in circles. And there's nothing on the form itself explaining what that was about. But if you go back to the 1940 reference manual, which is also available for free to download from the Census Bureau website, it says here, enter an X in a circle after the name of the person furnishing the information. Well, what a difference that makes, isn't it? when you look at something and you realize, in 1940, maybe it was the brother-in-law who lived with this family who was giving the information. His information might not be as accurate as whether the wife of the head of the household had done it, right? So it really helps us take that information with a kind of a grain of salt and understand, how much do I really think they would have known? Would they have really been in the know? Were they just kind of maybe living there temporarily and then they were guessing? Who knows? But it does give you a sense of how much weight to give the information that you're seeing on the page. So that's just one example of the kinds of things you might run into on a census form and why the enumerator reference manual would be so helpful. And in fact, those instructions, if you read through them, it's a really interesting read, I think, but I'm, a census geek. They also talked about who not to enumerate. So if you've ever wondered, why am I not finding my relatives? Well, maybe they weren't being picked on. Maybe they were actually fell within the list of people they were told not to enumerate. And part of this was about, don't enumerate people here when we know we're going to enumerate them over there. So if they were students, living away from home, or if they were a foreign citizen visiting the embassy, there were lots of different reasons why somebody may not be found here, but you would now know to go look over there. So take a look through that list and just get familiar with that manual. Something else about how complete, I think, they were striving to make the 1950 census was, there were a lot of different things they were doing. Some of the things that they put in place were, we talked about improving enumerator training, providing those more detailed ED maps. They also published missing person forms in local newspapers. So if by chance somebody said, well, I never had a census taker at my house, if they didn't find you, if they didn't get in touch with you, they printed forms so people could actually fill them out and turn them in themselves. And also the first ever post-enumeration survey. So they went back out and did a re-survey of a very small number of households, kind of just as a representative sample. So again, making strides to be far more accurate. But of course, one of the big challenges is, particularly in 1950 post-war, people are moving around, right? They're more mobile than they've ever been. And that means you might miss somebody. And again, before we jump to the conclusion that our relatives just got missed and that's why we can't find them, they actually may still be there. And this may be one of the reasons. The census enumerators had a special T-night canvas. Okay, and that was the solution to this idea that people were on the road, there were new highways being built, they were camping, they were touring, they might have been homeless. They might have been just back from the war and not living at home, but actually on the road headed to a big city and trying to get work. So maybe they were staying at a YMCA. T-night canvases was designed to find them. So on Tuesday, April 11th of 1950, they had this intensive coverage of all the places where they thought that people who were on the move might be. And to give you a perspective, the YMCA was a really popular place to stay. It was very affordable, particularly these young men who were single and out and looking for work. And there, in 1940 alone, there were over 100,000 rooms at the YMCA. So that's potentially a lot of people who we might think got missed, but actually were staying somewhere else. So they did that on Tuesday night from 5 to 11 p.m. And then Wednesday morning they get up and they do it again, 7 a.m. to noon. And hopefully you've captured everybody before they get up and move to the next location. On the 13th, on Thursday, they then went to missions and flop houses. And their job in all of these locations was to basically station themselves at the front door and have their clipboard in hand or in the lobby and to talk to people personally and look through the register, see who's registered to be there, and make sure that they have at some point talked to these people personally. In fact, they reached out to the American Hotel Association, let them know they were going to be doing this. This is the letter that they sent out in 1949. And so they had a lot of cooperation from the people who ran these establishments. And they had something called the ICR form. Now, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get to lay our eyes on an ICR form, but it's basically an individual census form. the idea was it's not a very private location. You're standing in a YMCA giving your information verbally to a census taker. So to respect their privacy, they would give them this form. And then the person would fill it out themselves. And that information would then be taken and entered onto the enumeration form. So they worked the hotel lobby and talked to people. They asked the guests that were coming and going. They call up to their rooms and try to reach them. And worst case, they would talk to the lobby staff, the hotel staff, the YMCA staff, and try to fill in the blanks, right? So sometimes they're getting this information directly from the person. Sometimes they're getting it from somebody who works there. Even with all that effort, sometimes people never completed the ICR form. And so in those cases, they did fill it out themselves. They looked at the hotel register. Remember the register that they would mark on the census, REG. So if you see REG on somebody in the census, you may be looking at information about that person that was not gleaned from them, but it was taken from the register of the place where they were staying. So again, that helps us kind of decide how much weight to give it in terms of how accurate it is. Okay, so there's no more waiting for finding people. So I'd like to show you some real life examples of how to search, what I think the best strategies are for searching, and some of the problems you may have already run into and how you might be able to solve them. So before you start your search, it's always a great idea to go back, I dig into my genealogy software database and kind of look at everybody who I think would have been around at that time. What information do I have? It may have been a long time since we've worked on folks that recent in our family tree. So it might be nice to go back and just kind of make up a little checklist. What are some of the questions that you're looking to answer that you didn't answer originally when you entered them into your family tree? So get yourself prepared. See who you want to look up. MyHeritage has their new census finder, but it helps you go in, and if you have your tree information on MyHeritage, it will process that and give you a list of who these people are that you could be looking for and information you need about them. Now, it's really, really helpful if you have an actual address. So you might know the town where they lived, and that's great. You probably still can find them, but if you have the actual address, it's even better. So it's worth a couple of minutes to do a little bit of checking in some of these locations. Old letters, diaries, scrapbooks, city directories are fantastic for little street addresses. I was really fortunate. My grandmother saved lots of postcards, so I found some addresses there, but also she would keep every receipt she ever got when she bought something. So I have all these receipts, and back then they would write their address on them. So year by year, month by month, I think sometimes I have addresses from my grandmother's family that moved around a little bit. So go get the addresses and then head to the National Archives. Now, you might hear from people, oh, the National Archives, that's just such a pain to work with and it's not good. But it's really right now, until the full index is done, this is your place to search. And the reason is they have already indexed through machine learning the names and the places. And that really, I don't think that information got out as widespread as Ancestry and Family Search and MyHeritage have been making their announcements and talking about it. They don't have the advantage of having the records prior to April 1st of 2022 in order to run the machine learning indexing. And then they follow it up with real people looking through and correcting it. That all takes time, and that will be another couple of months. But National Archives has been working on this for a long time. They already had the records. They were the ones who provided the digital records, and they already ran everything through for names and places. So important thing to know about this is if you know the head of the household, that's the person to search at the National Archives. And the reason is, if you think about a form, it's got last name and the head of household, and then it has first names of all the people who lived in that household. So you're going to have a lot better chance of getting an accurate answer back from the machine learning indexing if you focus on that one line that it was reading, which was the head of household. Not to say you can't search for individual people within the household, but I think you'll have a little more success. You can also add in the state and the county where they lived if you know what it was, and you can even put in the ED number. You can also use these various fields, the names, the different state, county, places, and they also had cities for really big cities, and the EDs. You can use these in combination. So if you really want to narrow in, you can try using multiple filters if you want to kind of broaden it out. And here's the thing, it's imperfect. So when you go, and I'm going to show you an example, you got to play with that a little bit. So go ahead and put in what you know, but then take off some things, and I'll show you the best way to kind of go about doing that. Enter as much as you know about the name, but don't worry about putting the full name because it does a really good job of matching these names. It's going to give you the very best and closest match at the top and work its way down from there on the search results. So you don't have to know, like I have a Sparowski as a surname. Well, I can start to spell it, but there's lots of different variations. Even if I just did, 2/3 of the name within that state, I think I'd have a good chance of finding that family. And then once you get your results back, you've got a couple different options. You can click through to the population schedules themselves. The ED maps, which we talked about, you can also find through Steve Morse's website, and also the original ED description. This is very little used, but I'm going to show you why it's so important. Let's start with a basic search at the National Archives. So I know my great-grandparents. I'm going to put in Gus Sporin. He was the head of household. He was a Sparowski at one time, but he became a Sporin. Just by searching his name, he is the very first. Out of 10,000 results, their machine learning put him as number one. So I'd say that's pretty darn good. And then from there, they start to give me variations and things. So if I zoom in, their viewer is actually very good, very easy, very clear, and there they are. So there's my great-grandparents from Germany. So that was super easy, and it's just based on a name. I didn't even put in the state. But that works well when you have a fairly unique surname. If you find errors or things, information that they need to fix, you can help them transcribe, and you can also download the record right here from this page. But of course, not every name is going to be that straightforward and that unique. So let me show you another example. I have my another set of grandparents, the Burketts, and they were in California. So I'm going to pull up California first. You can see there's 14,000 plus enumeration districts, so I need to get down to the county. I start to type in San Joaquin, and I notice, now start typing in because you'll notice they lived in Stockton, which is a pretty big city, and there's some very rural areas around them. I'm going to select Stockton, San Joaquin, because that is one of the options. Typing in and picking from the list is really a good way to go. Okay, so there's lots of different EDs here. I'm going to try their last name. So if I go to the name field and I type in Burkett, now I have 13 results. And if I look along the edge here, I know I'm looking for 75-8. Remember, we found that over at Ancestry. But I'm not actually seeing a 75-8. So I'm not going to panic. Right? It's possible that this combination is just a little bit much for the site to be able to find them for me. And that's not them. So I might come back here and say, well, I know the ED number. I could remove the county. Remember, let's go back and look at that ED number. At Ancestry, if I explore the maps and I type in the address, which I did have from my grandparents, type it in here. Remember, pick from the drop-down menu. Make sure that you use their version of the address, and that will get you to the exact location. So here it is. Click that, click search, and this should zoom in, and that's where it's going to pinpoint the house for us. And when we hover the mouse over the ED, it tells us it's 75-8. So I've reconfirmed, yep, that's indeed the right ED. So back here at the National Archives, remember all of our EDs were listed here on the left-hand side, and we don't see them at all. I saw 75.9, that was pretty close. 75.3. Okay, but that doesn't mean that's the only ones. I can search by ED. So if I come back here and I'm going to remove the name, sometimes names don't work well in conjunction with the other filters. I still have 5 pages of these EDs, and I don't want to have to go through all those. I think I'm going to just take the whole county off, stay in California, and just come down here and put my ED number, because I know exactly what it is. Click search. There it is. Down to 1. So who knows why it didn't come up, but it didn't. So we have start with state and just put the ED number in if you have it. That's a really nice, fast way to go. Now, I tested this. Could I go back and actually add Burkett? Would it show me the page? It doesn't do it. So, but that's okay, because one ED is not that many pages to have to just kind of browse through and take a look. And I even tried different variations on the name just to be sure I didn't miss it. So while it does a great job of finding names on their own, it doesn't seem to work quite as well in conjunction with the ED number. However, if I click population schedules, there's, maybe 24 pages here. I can scroll through them pretty quickly. Click on the first page. So I see East Arcade Street. Now, their address was 21 West Arcade. So I might get lucky. Maybe the enumerator just went right down the street. We could look at page number 3 here next. Zoom in. There's West Arcade. Okay, so the house number is in the first column. So I'm on 39. There they are. 21 is the first column, and that's the house number. And it's Burkett, Jr., Charles, and the family. And there's my mom. So we have, we didn't want to give up. Don't feel like if you don't find them right out of the gate that they aren't there. It might be that we just need to be a little more creative. We've got different filters to work with, and you can see it didn't take long to find that. So I'm going to download the image to my hard drive right here from the National Archives website. Okay, well, one of my viewers wrote me a question. I thought it was a great question. It's something that lots of people run into. And she said she found the census image of her husband's street, and there were several people listed as not at home. You maybe have noticed that a lot more than we've seen in other censuses. And they refer to other page numbers. But she said, when I looked at the set, there's only like 20 or 30 pages in this ED, but they're saying it's on page 73 or 74. So where is 73 and 74? Well, here's the census page. She found her husband in 85-1440, and she noticed that there's some people who lived across the street that he recognized, some friends of the family, so she knows she's in the right neighborhood. And here we can see that she searched all through here, and she didn't find anybody for this family. So she saw that some people were not at home, and she suspected that her husband's family might be one of those families. Maybe you've run into that too, where you've wondered, is that mine? And then you look and there's only 20 or 30 pages, and they're talking about page 74. Maybe you don't get those pages. Well, as she explored it, she noticed she's in this ED. She sees neighbors who lived right across the street. So she should be in the right neighborhood, and she doesn't see his family anywhere. So when she contacted me, my first inclination was, are you sure you're in the right enumeration district? You've looked through this entire enumeration district and you didn't see the Vaughn family anywhere. Now that might seem far-fetched, but think about it. It's like with anything else, there are borders. It could be that this street is right up next to another ED. We don't know. It could literally be the other side of the street. So we don't want to jump into any conclusions that they either missed the Vaughn family or that they didn't have the pages for the not at home people. So the way to check and see if you've got people in the right ED is I'm going to come back to stevemorse.org. And I'm going to the Unified Census tool, and I'm going to go to Michigan. That's the state that they were talking about. And in the county, I'm going to select the county. It was in Wayne County because this is Detroit. The city, and there's Detroit. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so there's a lot of ED numbers to choose from. How do we narrow this down? Well, we could come in here and we could put the house number because she knew the address where they lived. And it will give you a drop-down list of all the different potential streets. And he lived here on Monte Vista Avenue, 15757. Okay, so here's a much smaller, manageable list of EDs that could have had this. And 1440 is part of that. 85-1440. We're going to click the ED description. Remember I told you about that record set that doesn't get used much, but it could be really helpful. It gives us this sorted list. And you'll notice all the hyperlinked ED numbers. And it talks about the different streets. And if you click View, you actually can go through and look at the pages digitized from the Census Enumeration, the Enumeration District description book. And here's 85-1440. And it talks about that it includes Monte Vista Avenue. So it's totally understandable why she thought this was the right one. However, if you kind of look through the other nearby listed ED numbers, we might want to look and see, are there other EDs that also include Monte Vista? Up here, the next one, right next door, 1439, Detroit City. It's part of Ward 16, the same ward, and it also covers Monte Vista. Okay, well, we could search through all of the pages just to check. Here's another kind of a quick and easy way to get your list. So here was our census page description. But if you go back to the original list and you do a quick Alt-F on your keyboard, like find, type in Monte Vista, and it will instantly show me exactly which EDs, without me having to go through and read all of them, have Monte Vista. It will highlight them for me. So I can make a little checklist. Now I've got 1439, 1440, 1494, and 1495. So I'm probably going to look at 1439 first because it's the closest one. And we know that there was a family right there on the page that he recognized. So back at the National Archives, I'm going to go clear my original ED number and come down here and add the ED number. 1439 and click search. Okay, so here's Detroit in Wayne Township. And if we click population schedules, let's make sure we're in the right one. We are. It's 1439. That never hurts to just make sure that this index is correct and we have the right one. And if I click for this first page, let's take a look. So we just zoom in and start to get our bearings. Are we anywhere near Monte Vista? Well, I see Monte Vista written on the left-hand side. There's her husband's family. How lucky are we that we got it on the first page? That was totally random luck. It truly was. But there he is. Christopher is her husband, Christopher Vaughn, and the Eugene Vaughn family. There's the address, 15757 on Monte Vista. Monte Vista, kind of, you tilt your head and you can see it there on the left. So it is possible that when you think you haven't been able to find somebody, that actually the first question you should be asking is, are you really in the right enumeration district? And I'm surprised how many people I've heard from, because I've been teaching on this and I've been quoted in articles and stuff, and people have reached out to me, and I've been able to find every single person that has reached out so far. So we know that they're there. What's really fascinating about Chris's story, in particular, Chris Vaughn, is that he mentioned when Kate wrote me that his mother had just passed away just before the 1950 census was taken. And it's amazing when you look at the record and you see that initially it was written in MAR for married, and that was crossed out, and WD was written in as widowed. In fact, I'd like to share with you from Kate and Chris themselves kind of what it meant for them to make this find into this discovery.
Hi, Lisa. This is Kate Vaughn and Chris Vaughn in Ann Arbor. And I was browsing the new census, the 1950, and was trying to find my husband's family. I came to this right street and his neighbors that he grew up with, but I couldn't find him, and I had problems trying to understand ward and district and that in the census. Thank you, Lisa, because I emailed you, and I'm sorry I get emotional, but I emailed you and you found her family. Can you talk, please?
Yeah, this is Chris. It was the neighborhood I grew up in, and the reason Kate is emotional is the year of that particular census was after my mother died, who died when I was 7, and before my dad had remarried. So it was a period of time when my dad was single, and it was great for me because it was a wonderful neighborhood to grow up in. I don't have a lot of memories of my mom, but I have memories of how kind and caring and the rest of it. My mom and dad were immigrants from Ireland, and so it's nice to be able to get that kind of information, to hear the names of neighbors that I knew, of some of the children I grew up with and played with, because we had lots of kids in the neighborhood. It was a wonderful neighborhood. I'm going to give it back to Kate now.
Okay. Excuse me for being emotional, but I'm one of those people that at all weddings, funerals, and when you raise a flag, I bawl. So please excuse that. But it also is a timely thing for the family because Chris's sister passed away. Chris, go on.
My sister May, who was the oldest of 5, passed away in February. I mean, she passed away at the ripe old age of 93, had a wonderful life, lived on her own till she was 91, went up north with us when she was 90, just had a good life.
I love sharing that because I think that one of the most important takeaways is that we as genealogists, we have this amazing opportunity to touch the lives and the hearts of a lot of people around us who don't normally do genealogy. And the 1950 census is a wonderful way to do that. I've done it myself with my neighbors, my friends, and said, hey, do you want to see yourself in the census? Would you like to see, have your record from your parents? It's so easy to find now, and it's going to get easier. And what a wonderful way to share the joy of genealogy with other people. So some of the takeaways I really hope that you'll walk away from this with is that the National Archives right now is the best search functionality that's available to you. That will change and evolve as all the other genealogy sites finish their indexing through artificial intelligence, and then they apply the volunteer program that Family Search is doing with real people looking and reviewing that. So right now, go to the National Archives and start there first. And know that Not at Home, and I'm going to show you an example here in just a second. And that's kind of why I got a little confused, because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss these slides. I want to show you how to find the Not at Home people, because that was something that really threw Kate at first. She thought maybe that was the Vaughn family. I'm going to show you how to find those pages. They're at the end of the ED. Check the Census ED descriptions. You could see how helpful that was to be able to go through stevemorris.org, find the ED description, and check and see. Perhaps the reason we're not finding somebody is because they're in a neighboring ED. and search the addresses at the new Ancestry's ED map tool, because that is a wonderful way to not only see it, but to confirm that you have the right enumeration district number. And of course, most importantly, keep in mind there's always a potential for error with any of these, whether it's the census itself, it's the website you're using, it's the tool, it's the way the artificial intelligence worked. Don't let that slow you down or stop you. And don't assume that when you hit that first obstacle that that's the end of the road, because I guarantee you it's not. Okay, so what do you do when nobody's at home and they're listed as being somewhere else in the census? Well, on Monte Vista Street at 15746, there was somebody listed as not at home, and it said see sheet 74, line 14. And of course, Kate said, well, there were only 20 or 30 pages in the entire ED. So it seems like maybe this is some of those pages that we don't get in the digitized records. Well, actually, it's the sheet number they're referring to, right? Not page number. They're saying see sheet 74. So if you're looking at the collection, and now this is a corner of what she was looking at in this ED, it looks like there's maybe 36 pages total. On page 31, it says you're on sheet number 30. Well, that doesn't seem very optimistic for getting to 74, right? But look at this, page 32, you're on sheet 71. So don't stop there. Go ahead and get to the end of this roll, because sure enough, page 35 in this roll that she was looking in this ED is sheet 74. So it's there, it's in the upper right-hand corner, and they are typically always found at the end of that enumeration district collection that you've pulled up. And if by chance you still have trouble finding people, again, I would stop and see if I couldn't nail down that I have the right address. So maybe head back to 1940. There's so many records available to us, and I would start with things like where were they living in 1940, and you can get that census for free over at Family Search, and city directories. What a gold mine for finding addresses, and sometimes you can get them literally year by year. So check with your state archives, do online Google searches. Typically, it's maybe has been digitized somewhere. Check all the subscriptions that you have to the genealogy websites. Ancestry has tons of city directories. There are so many ways to get your hands on city directories that don't stop. Go find that address. Make sure, reconfirm that you're in the right place. And my friends, that's about an hour spent giving you a kind of a guide to the latest and greatest information on the 1950 census.